Ashkelon, Akelon, also Ashkelon and Ascalon, Arabic, Ascalon, Latin, Ascalonia, Akkadian, Iskaluna, Ancient Greek, Sigma Kappa Alpha Lambda Omega Nu. Ashkelon is a coastal city in the southern district of Israel on the Mediterranean coast, 50 kilometers south of Tel Aviv, and 13 kilometers north of the border with the Gaza Strip. The ancient seaport of Ashkelon dates back to the Neolithic age. In the course of its history, it has been ruled by the ancient Egyptians, the Philistines, the Israelites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Phoenicians, the Hasmoneans, the Romans, the Persians, the Arabs, and the Crusaders, until it was destroyed by the Mamluks in 1270. The Arab village of Al-Majdal or Al-Majdal Ascalon was established a few kilometers inland from the ancient site in the 16th century. Under Ottoman rule. In 1918, it became part of the British-occupied Enemy Territory Administration and in 1920 became part of Mandatory Palestine. In the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Al-Majdal was the forward position of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force based in Gaza. The village was occupied by Israeli forces on 5 November 1948, by which time most of the Arab population of 11,000 had fled. Jews moved into the area later that year. The Israeli town was initially called Migdal Gaza, Migdal Gad and Migdal Ashkelon. In 1953, the nearby neighborhood of Afrida was incorporated and the name Ashkelon was readopted to the town. By 1961, Ashkelon was ranked 18th among the Israeli urban centers with a population of 24,000. In 2014 the population of Ashkelon was 126,819. Etymology. The name Ashkelon is probably Western Semitic, and might be connected to the root SQL, perhaps attesting to its importance as a center for mercantile activities. Scallion and Charlotta derived from Ascalonia, the Latin name for Ashkelon. History. Ashkelon was the oldest and largest seaport in Canaan, one of the 5 cities of the Philistines, north of Gaza and south of Jaffa. Neolithic era. The Neolithic site of Ashkelon is located on the Mediterranean coast, 1.5 kilometers north of Tel Ashkelon. It is dated by radiocarbon dating to California, 7,900 BP, to the poorly known pre-Pottery Neolithic sea phase of the Neolithic. It was discovered and excavated in 1954 by French archaeologist Jean Perrot. In 1997–1998, a large-scale salvage project was conducted at the site by Yosef Garfinkel on behalf of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and nearly 1,000 square meters were examined. A final excavation report was published in 2008. In the site over 100 fireplaces and hearths were found and numerous pits, but no solid architecture, except for one wall. Various phases of occupation were found, one atop the other, with sterile layers of sea sand between them. This indicates that the site was occupied on a seasonal basis. The main finds were enormous quantities of animal bones and 20,000 flint artifacts. Usually at Neolithic sites flints far outnumber animal bones. The bones belong to domesticated and non-domesticated animals. When all aspects of this site are taken into account, it appears to have been used by pastoral nomads for meat processing. The nearby sea could supply salt necessary for the conservation of meat. Canaanite settlement. The city was originally built on a sandstone outcropping and has a good underground water supply. It was relatively large as an ancient city with as many as 15,000 people living inside the walls. Ashkelon was a thriving Middle Bronze Age city of more than 150 acres. Its commanding ramparts, measuring 1.5 miles long, 50 feet high and 150 feet thick, and even as a ruin they would stand 2 stories high. The thickness of the walls was so great that the mud-brick city gate had a stone-lined, 8 feet wide tunnel-like barrel vault. coated with white plaster, to support the superstructure. It is the oldest such vault ever found. Later Roman and Islamic fortifications, faced with stone, followed the same footprint, a vast semicircle protecting Ashkelon on the land side. On the sea it was defended by a high natural bluff. A roadway more than 20 feet in width ascended the rampart from the harbour and entered a gate at the top. In 1991, the ruins of a small ceramic tabernacle was found, a finely cast bronze statuette of a bull calf, originally silvered, 4 inches long. Images of calves and bulls were associated with the worship of the Canaanite gods El and Baal. Ashkelon is mentioned in the Egyptian execration texts of the 11th dynasty as Askanu, in the Amarna letters. There are 7 letters to and from Ashkelon's king Yidya, and the Egyptian pharaoh. One letter from the pharaoh to Yidya was discovered in the early 1900s. Philistine settlement. The Philistines conquered Canaanite Ashkelon about 1150 BC. Their earliest pottery, types of structures and inscriptions are similar to the early Greek urbanized center at Mycenaean mainland Greece, adding weight to the hypothesis that the Philistines were one of the populations among the Sea Peoples that upset cultures throughout the eastern Mediterranean at that time. Ashkelon became one of the 5 Philistine cities that were constantly warring with the Israelites and the Kingdom of Judah. According to Herodotus, its Temple of Venus was the oldest of its kind, imitated even in Cyprus. And he mentions that this temple was pillaged by marauding Scythians during the time of their sway over the Medes, as it was the last of the Philistine cities to hold out against Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. When it fell in 604 BC, burnt and destroyed and its people taken into exile, the Philistine era was over. Classical period. Ashkelon was soon rebuilt. Until the conquest of Alexander the Great, Ashkelon's inhabitants were influenced by the dominant Persian culture. It is in this archaeological layer that excavations have found dog burials. It is believed the dogs may have had a sacred role, however evidence is not conclusive. After the conquest of Alexander in the 4th century BC, Ashkelon was an important free city and Hellenistic seaport. It had mostly friendly relations with the Hasmonean kingdom and Herodian kingdom of Judea, in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC. In a significant case of an early witch hunt, during the reign of the Hasmonean queen Salome Alexandra, the court of Simeon ben Shetich sentenced to death 80 women in Ashkelon who had been charged with sorcery. Herod the Great, who became a client king of Rome over Judea and its surrounds in 30 BC, had not received Ashkelon, yet he built monumental buildings there, bathhouses, elaborate fountains and large colonnades. A discredited tradition suggests Ashkelon has been his birthplace. In 06 CE, when a Roman imperial province was set in Judea, overseen by a lower-ranked governor, Ashkelon was moved directly to the higher jurisdiction of the governor of Syria province. The city remained loyal to Rome during the Great Revolt, 6670 AD. Byzantine period. The city of Ashkelon appears on a fragment of the 6th century AD Madaba map. Auxentius took part in the First Council of Constantinople in 381, Jobinus in a synod held in Lydda in 415, Leontius in both the Robber Council of Ephesus in 449 and the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Bishop Dionysius, who represented Ashkelon at a synod in Jerusalem in 536, was on another occasion called upon to pronounce on the validity of a baptism with sand in waterless desert and sent the person to be baptized in water. No longer a residential bishopric, Ashkelon is today listed by the Catholic Church as a titular see. Crusader era. During the Crusades, Ashkelon was an important city due to its location near the coast in between the Crusader states and Egypt. In 1099, shortly after the siege of Jerusalem, an Egyptian Fatimid army that had been sent to relieve Jerusalem was defeated by a Crusader force at the Battle of Ashkelon. The city itself was not captured by the Crusaders because of internal disputes among their leaders. This battle is widely considered to have signified the end of the First Crusade. Until 1153, the Fatimids were able to launch raids into the Kingdom of Jerusalem from Ashkelon, which meant that the southern border of the Crusader states was constantly unstable. In response to these incursions into Outremer, King Fulk of Jerusalem constructed a number of Christian settlements around the city during the 1130s. In order to neutralize the threat of the Muslim garrison. In 1148, during the Second Crusade, the city was unsuccessfully besieged for 8 days by a small Crusader army that was not fully supported by the Crusader states. In 1150, the Fatimids fortified the city with 53 towers, as it was their most important frontier fortress. 3 years later, after a 5-month siege, the city was captured by a Crusader army led by King Baldwin III of Jerusalem. It was then added to the county of Jaffa to form the county of Jaffa and Ashkelon, which became one of the 4 major seigneuries of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. After the Crusader conquest of Jerusalem, the 6 elders of the Karaite Jewish community in Ashkelon contributed to the ransoming of captured Jews and holy relics from Jerusalem's new rulers. The letter of the Karaite elders of Ashkelon, which was sent to the Jewish elders of Alexandria, describes their participation in the ransom effort and the ordeals suffered by many of the freed captives. A few hundred Jews, Karaites and Rabbinites were living in Ashkelon in the second half of the 12th century, but moved to Jerusalem when the city was destroyed in 1191. Islamic era. In 1187, Saladin took Ashkelon as part of his conquest of the Crusader states following the Battle of Hattin. In 1191, during the Third Crusade, Saladin demolished the city because of its potential strategic importance to the Christians. But the leader of the crusade, King Richard I of England, constructed a citadel upon the ruins. Ashkelon subsequently remained part of the diminished territories of Outremer throughout most of the 13th century, and Richard, Earl of Cornwall, reconstructed and refortified the citadel during 1240–41, as part of the Crusader policy of improving the defences of coastal sites. The Egyptians retook Ashkelon in 1247 during a Saleh Ayyub's conflict with the Crusader states, and the city was returned to Muslim rule. The Mamluk dynasty came into power in Egypt in 1250, and the ancient and medieval history of Ashkelon was brought to an end in 1270, when the Mamluk Sultan Baybars ordered the citadel and harbour at the site to be destroyed. As a result of this destruction, the site was abandoned by its inhabitants and fell into disuse. According to Shiite tradition, the head of Hussein ibn Ali, grandson of Muhammad, was buried in Ashkelon. In the late 11th century it was moved to a new shrine named Mashhad Nabi Hussein, built for the purpose. In 1153, at the time of the Crusaders' conquest of Ashkelon, the head was moved to Fustat. The shrine was described as the most magnificent building in Ashkelon. In the British Mandate period it was a large maqam on top of a hill, with no tomb, but a fragment of a pillar showing the place where the head had been buried. In July 1950, the shrine was destroyed at the instructions of Moshe Dayan in accordance with the 1950s Israeli policy of erasing Muslim historical sites within Israel. Ottoman and Mandate eras. The Arab village of Majdal was mentioned by historians and tourists at the end of the 15th century. In 1596, Ottoman records showed Majdal to be a large village of 559 Muslim households, making it the 7th most populous locality in Palestine after Safad, Jerusalem, Gaza, Nablus, Hebron and Kafr Qana. The census of 1931 found 6,166 Muslims and 41 Christians living there. By 1948, the population had grown to about 11,000. Majdal was especially known for its weaving industry. The town had around 500 looms in 1909. In 1920, a British government report estimated that there were 550 cotton looms in the town with an annual output worth 30–40 million francs. But the industry suffered from imports from Europe, and by 1927 only 119 weaving establishments remained. The three major fabrics produced were Malik, Ikdari, and Jilhia. These were used for festival dresses throughout southern Palestine. Many other fabrics were produced, some with poetic names such as Jinnehu, Nashek Ro'o, and Abu Maitain. State of Israel. During the 1948 war, the Egyptian army occupied a large part of Gaza, including Mashdal. Over the next few months, the town was subjected to Israeli air raids and shelling. All but about 1,000 of the town's residents were forced to leave by the time it was captured by Israeli forces as a sequel to Operation Yoav on 4 November 1948. General Yigal Allon ordered the expulsion of the remaining Palestinians, but the local commanders did not do so, and the Arab population soon recovered to more than 2,500, due mostly to refugees slipping back and also due to the transfer of Palestinians from nearby villages. Most of them were elderly, women, or children. During the next year or so, the Palestinians were held in a confined area surrounded by barbed wire, which became commonly known as the ghetto. Moshe Dayan and Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion were in favor of expulsion, while Mapam and the Israeli labor union Histadrut objected. The government offered the Palestinians positive inducements to leave, including a favorable currency exchange, but also caused panic through nighttime raids. The first group was deported to the Gaza Strip by truck on 17 August 1950 after an expulsion order had been served. The deportation was approved by Ben-Gurion and Dayan over the objections of Pinhas Levon, Secretary General of the Histadrut, who envisioned the town as a productive example of equal opportunity. By October 1950, 20 Palestinian families remained, most of whom later moved to Lidur or Gaza. According to Israeli records, in total 2,333 Palestinians were transferred to the Gaza Strip, 60 to Jordan, 302 to other towns in Israel, and a small number remained in Ashkelon. Levon argued that this operation dissipated the last shred of trust the Arabs had in Israel, the sincerity of the state's declarations on democracy and civil equality, and the last remnant of confidence the Arab workers had in the Histadrut. Acting on an Egyptian complaint, the Egyptian-Israel Mixed Armistice Commission ruled that the Palestinians transferred from Mashdal should be returned to Israel. But this was not done. Repopulation of the recently vacated Arab dwellings by Jews became official policy by December 1948, but the process began slowly. The Israeli National Plan of June 1949 designated Al-Mashdal as the site for a regional urban center of 20,000 people. From July 1949, new immigrants and demobilized soldiers moved to the new town, increasing the Jewish population to 2,500 within 6 months. During 1949, the town was renamed Migdal Gaza, and then Migdal Gad. Soon afterwards it became Migdal Ashkelon. In 1953 the nearby neighborhood of Afrida was incorporated and the current name Ashkelon was adopted. By 1961, Ashkelon ranked 18th among the Israeli urban centers with a population of 24,000. On 1–2 March 2008, rockets fired by Hamas from the Gaza Strip hit Ashkelon, wounding 7, and causing property damage. Mayor Roni Mahatsri stated that, "This is a state of war. I know no other definition for it. If it lasts a week or two, we can handle that, but we have no intention of allowing this to become part of our daily routine." On 12 May 2008, a rocket fired from the northern Gazan city of Beit Lahia hit a shopping mall in southern Ashkelon, causing significant structural damage. According to the Jerusalem Post, 4 people were seriously injured and 87 were treated for shock. 15 people suffered minor to moderate injuries as a result of the collapsed structure. Southern District Police Chief Yuri Barlev believed the Grad model Katyusha rocket was manufactured in Iran. In March 2008, 230 buildings and 30 cars were damaged by rocket fire on Ashkelon. In March 2009, a Qassam rocket hit a school, destroying classrooms and injuring 2 people. In July 2010, a Grad rocket hit a residential area in Ashkelon, damaging nearby cars and an apartment complex. In November 2014, the mayor, Itamar Shimoni, began a policy of discrimination against Arab workers, refusing to allow them to work on city projects to build bomb shelters for children. His discriminatory actions brought criticism from others, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkesh, who likened the discrimination to the anti-Semitism experienced by Jews in Europe 70 years earlier. Urban development. In 1949 and 1950, 3 immigrant transit camps were established alongside Majdal for Jewish refugees from Arab countries, Romania and Poland. Northwest of Migdal and the immigrant camps, on the lands of the abandoned Arab village Al-Jura, entrepreneur Zvi Siegel, one of the signatories of Israel's Declaration of Independence, established the upscale Barnea neighborhood. A large tract of land south of Barnea was handed over to the trusteeship of the South African Zionist Federation, which established the neighborhood of Afrida. Plans for the city were drawn up in South Africa according to the Garden City model. Migdal was surrounded by a broad ring of orchards. Barnea developed slowly, but Afrida grew rapidly. The first homes, built in 1951, were inhabited by new Jewish immigrants from South Africa and South America, with some native-born Israelis. The first public housing project for residents of the transit camps, the Southern Hills Project or Zion Hill, was built in 1952. Economy. Ashkelon is the northern terminus for the Trans-Israel pipeline, which brings petroleum products from Eilat to an oil terminal at the port. The Ashkelon seawater reverse osmosis desalination plant is the largest in the world. The project was developed as a bot by a consortium of 3 international companies, Veolia Water, IDE Technologies and Elran. In March 2006, it was voted Desalination Plant of the Year in the Global Water Awards. Since 1992, Israel Beer Breweries has been operating in Ashkelon, brewing Carlsberg and Tuborg beer for the Israeli market. The brewery is owned by the Central Bottling Company, which has also held the Israeli franchise for Coca-Cola products since 1968. Arik Ashkelon, a local brand of Arik, is operating since 1925 and distributed throughout Israel. Education. The city has 19 elementary schools, and 9 junior high and high schools. The Ashkelon Academic College opened in 1998, and now hosts thousands of students. Harvard University operates an archaeological summer school program in Ashkelon.